Hey there, founders. I'm excited here today. We have Jonathan here with Ironpaper, founder and CEO of Ironpaper. And Ironpaper, as it says right there, is a B2B growth agency, generates leads and drives sales for B2B companies that have a long sales cycle. But more importantly, I brought Jonathan here, twisted his rubber arm to join us and share how he actually built his agency to the specific level of success that he's enjoying today, which a lot of our founders are in the services business and they're struggling at this growth point where they might be successful individually, but then how do I get it so I'm not working so hard or trading so many dollars for hours? I'm not involved in every aspect of the business. It's scaling, maybe acting more as an asset that operates on its own, quality of life, ways to involve themselves working on the business versus working in the business and delivery all at the same time. These are all the things that I want to cover today. So let's, without further ado, welcome Jonathan. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, I'm thrilled. This is a lot of fun, and I love this community. I think it's a profound community of founders, and it's exciting to be part of it.
Perfect. Great way to start. Let's talk about you. So what is your history? So give us a brief idea of what you were doing before you founded your agency, and then walk us through the story of how Ironpaper came to be.
Yeah, I started my agency very, very early in my career. I was in my 20s. So about, it's about 20 years ago, I started Ironpaper. And I was learning a lot as I was building the company. And prior to that, I was an artist. I was a visual artist, completely different background. And so shortly after 9/11, the art market dried up and I wasn't able to make my living as well. As a professional artist, I found a lot of challenges. I was also frustrated in New York City, just trying to get by as an artist, paying my rent every month. And I wanted to develop something. I started with design and just became enamored and fell in love with the evolving digital realm. Not just marketing, but uh, digital strategy, digital design. That whole area of interactivity was fascinating me. Right after the first dot-com bubble burst, I decided to found Ironpaper in that kind of chaotic environment.
And so what happened was you so I'm curious because you're very specific in terms of the agency. It says Ironpaper is a specialized agency. We help remarkable B2B companies grow. So here's your mission. We love our mission. Our work crosses the boundaries of B2B marketing, content, sales enablement, qualified lead generation, website design, and B2B strategy. We are obsessed with improving measurable business results for B2B companies. I bring this up because typically what happens is when someone kind of goes off and starts an agency, they're typically specialized before they go generalized. But then also your story is very specific, long sales cycles, B2B. How did you get to this point in time where you were able to define your service offering, the areas of your service offering, and how to communicate that message?
Oh, it was easy. I just made every single mistake that you can possibly make. I actually started as a more of a generalist. I would take where I work where I could get it. I didn't have an area of specialty. The only thing I cared about was I really felt that there had to be an intersection between design and technology. I am a self-taught coder, and I would also do design, and I would kind of bring those things together. And I found that when these two disciplines would intersect, you could make better decisions, especially if you had people who had the skills to cause that intersection, and ask better questions and really investigate what happens when design and technology converge. But in the beginning, I would take clients from the realm of B2C, from B2B, nonprofits. I even in the very beginning, I would do some volunteer work. I would help if I didn't know a certain business category, I would volunteer just to learn. I sacrificed a lot in the first couple of years And I always put learning ahead of everything else because I knew I wanted to develop a company um, that was going to be healthy and self-sufficient and sustainable long term. And I wanted to grow it into something strong and profound. So I knew in the early stages I had to prioritize learning. What I didn't realize is that never left. To this day, I study, I'm reading, I'm constantly trying to absorb new models, new approaches. But the difference is back then, I was so worried about just paying my bills, paying payroll. I don't have to worry about as much today. And right now, a lot of my learning and growth is about more of a process of fine-tuning our systems, processes, our people management and such. What happened over time was I realized it was harder and harder for my team to work with clients from such divergent needs. We have B2B companies on one side and e-commerce and B2C and nonprofits. And it was difficult because each of their different needs required training, education, feedback, continuous study and optimization. And my goal was to really help clients be successful in the digital arena. But I was struggling in the early stages with all of these different types of industries, all of these different types of selling mechanisms, sales mechanisms. Specialization was something that completely transformed Ironpaper. It allowed me to have focused trainings. It allowed me to build playbooks that were more scalable. It allowed me to focus on the needs of a smaller, more limited group of companies and really get to the heart of what is preventing them from growing? What is preventing them from hitting their goals and achieving growth truly, measurably, impactfully in the market? So specialization was the key. It was a breaking point. I'd say that we started the specialization process about 10 years ago, and it took time. And part of that process is I had to make cuts. I had to stop going after certain industries. I had to cut areas of the business that were actually successful. I had to make hard choices. We would just basically I had to write down our sales rules and document them, so we wouldn't be going off in different directions as we were trying to sell to different companies, and we'd stick to this kind of sales focus area, like kind of an ideal customer profile, if that makes sense.
Okay, let's jump up from that and that process. I'm going to kind of take you back a little bit.
Yeah.
But before we do, I had the pleasure of spending some time with you in a group atmosphere. It's kind of one of the things that we do here at startups.com is we put people in groups so you can connect with your peers. And we had other people running different types of agencies, not necessarily in marketing, but in all different industries. And, for example, I look at the way that you just message your website and you talk about you're communicating your message, right off your homepage here. One of the things I heard you say and really highlight was know your unique value proposition. Understand the unique value proposition, and that pretty much drives everything else. And I'm getting a sense that that's really one of the foundational things you did to specialize and work through that. Tell me a little bit more. Like, what does that mean, unique value proposition? How do you get there? How did it help you? What would you advise other founders? Let's focus on the unique value proposition for a moment.
Yeah, I'll start in the very beginning. I didn't have one. I never wrote it down. I couldn't quite articulate it. If someone asked me in an elevator, what value do we create? I would probably go off in this long-winded tangent of what we do, how we do it, but not necessarily why or the impact of our work. And I felt that over time, the focus on impact, both the perceived impact, perceived value of a client, like how clients see us and their happiness, and the tangible, measurable impact that our work produces was increasingly critical, especially as we wanted to improve our pricing, as we wanted to grow our pricing. So I started a process of just simply writing it down. And then I would almost like in a mirror practice talking about it. I would talk about it longhand, shorthand. I would talk about it with other people. And over the years, I found that our value proposition became more and more refined just through the act of meditating on this question of why do we do what we do? What kind of value are we trying to help our clients create? Now, it also allowed us to start to interview clients from the perspective of the value proposition, and they ultimately helped me refine my value proposition around their needs, not what the market says we should be doing, not necessarily going and reading a blog or talking to another agency owner and copying their service offering or copying what some marketing blog says. Our clients informed and helped me develop the value proposition we have today. I also have this process where every year for the whole company, I sit down and I write down our playbook for the year ahead. And it's largely built around this notion of a value proposition. One example of it is I found that a lot of times in the early stages, if a company's doing something like SEO or an ad campaign, they would focus on things like driving traffic or click-through rates, these really low-level indicators of performance that don't mean a lot to a client. And so I felt like, that doesn't truly resonate with buyers, with our buyers. Our buyers, what they really care about is growth and the mechanisms that help them achieve growth. So I started to think differently about what metrics do we want to track? Do we want to focus on? How would we define success? And I would test that on sales calls and get feedback right away and have these candid, open conversations with clients on sales calls that allowed me to incrementally improve my value proposition from one year to the next. And I found it to be truly helpful. The other thing is it helped me also differentiate my agency against others. I find a lot of times, especially at early stages, business owners may want to copy their competitors. And to me, I found that to be one of the most disastrous things that a company can do. Because one, you're depriving yourself of the opportunity to be different, to stand out, to have a clear, refined message that's built around the buyers that you feel that you can help the best. And that's really what our value proposition is taking shape around.
So we always advise our founders to determine a persona or an avatar or an ideal customer profile. I'm curious, and maybe it's like a chicken and egg scenario, maybe they both happen at the same time, but during your process of refining your unique value proposition, how much did you first target the ideal customer? Did it start there and then you adjusted your UVP for them, or was it kind of organic? Did both shift over time? Like, how did you reconcile that?
Gosh, I've had so many changes over time. There was a period of time where Ironpaper did a lot of e-commerce work. And so we focused on different size e-commerce businesses. There were times when we focused more on nonprofits than others. And I found that, I had to picture what I wanted my company to grow into, kind of the vision of the organization. And then I had to continuously ask myself, well, where are we really skilled and where are we driving the most value from our current clients? And also, can those clients help us get to where we want to go? Can they help us grow into the shape that we want to take in the future? And so it caused me to make a lot of difficult decisions. I had to do a lot of drawing on paper and sharing it with my team and getting their feedback. But I think having the discipline to say, these are the type of clients we want to go after, and let's not pursue business outside of this picture was incredibly difficult, and it required a lot of discipline. But it was the mechanism that allowed me to eventually build more of a self-sustaining organization, one that's not riddled with hair on fire problems, where kind of the fire bell is going off all the time and everybody's running around like chickens with their heads cut off. I feel like today it was through this process of meditating on who is our ideal customer, what kind of value proposition do they need to grow? What are the problems that they're wrestling with today, and what might be their problems tomorrow? That act of focusing, that disciplined act of creating more focus in the business allowed me to develop a better talent bench, better processes that really cut to the heart of the kind of value we want to unlock, allowed me to put the right tools in place. So we weren't spread against all these different technologies that ultimately we'd be really good at a few things. We'd kind of be like a jack of all trades. We became incredible specialists with a certain set of tools that allowed us to create the value that we were going after. And just a couple of the trade-offs we make, we cut out things like e-commerce from our client roster. We cut B2C entirely from our client roster. We made a lot of difficult decisions. And those trade-offs, again, are great because there are other agencies out there that can then specialize in those areas of business, those markets. And I feel like it allows agencies to have a better differentiated position in the market and understand their customers better.
It sounds like your whole journey has been very iterative. You sort of, in your humility say we made every mistake possible, but it sounds like you were failing forward. You're making the mistake and learning from it and then adjusting it. I'll tell you a story from my past. One of my very first startup was in animation. We were one of the first companies to do animation for the web, way back in the day when it was Flash, and the animated GIFs were, huge documents, etc. And we made a commitment. We said we learned 3D animation, and the big business at that time was 3D animated logos for corporate presentations. So, a spinning metal logo, it kind of brings in the presentation. And we didn't want to do that. So we chose our differentiation was going to be character animation, because that's what we want to do. We want to do entertainment, things like that. So we said no to all the corporate logo work. But the result of that was years of pain, like no revenue. All we did, every spare moment when we were not making money, we worked on our character portfolio. And then poof, it was like overnight, we got a commercial. Someone saw all our work and we were able to convince them to do a commercial. And it was almost like, we spent 2 years starving to become an overnight success. And then we became known because we were different from everybody else, all the other 3D spinning, graphics agencies. I'm curious, how hard was it? How lean did it get? Did you already have established business and you slowly weaned yourself off? Or were there times where you were ready to say, this isn't working, we're going to shut this thing down? How scary did it get making those decisions?
Yeah, I mean, we took a different approach from a lot of companies. For example, I never took out a loan to grow Ironpaper. I never went and sought external funding. I didn't want the pressure from those growth tools. I wanted to grow the business organically. I also worked really hard and got into the work personally quite a bit. If it was ever, if something wasn't going quite right, which is inevitable in the world of digital transformation, marketing, websites. We did grow every year, but we grew slowly. And I didn't, and I would feel bad at times. I kind of felt like I was taking this approach where I see other businesses growing incredibly fast, like a comet in the sky, and we were just so slow. And I've been in business for 20 years, and we would basically grow employee by employee, but I've never done a layoff. And so one of the things that I got good at over that time is I studied our finances. I always have our finance sheet open, and I'm always looking at, well, what could happen tomorrow that could hurt the business? What could happen, what could be around the corner that could be a big challenge for us? And I tried to make sure I was chipping away and storing cash and just having enough of a cash reserve to get around that corner or get around that hill, and through the forest ahead. When I did transitions, such as, having to move beyond a certain type of category of business, or starting to focus my company or raise rates, all of those critical kind of incremental transformations, like you mentioned, what I would do is I realized, well, I had to be pragmatic about this. And I would kind of fade in the new idea as I was fading out the old. So I took this more gradual approach, and I would set time-based milestones. 6 months from now, where do I want to be? 1 year from now, where should we be? And then it allowed me to reverse engineer from that desired milestone the kind of actions I needed to take to get there. For example, that a lot of times as an organization grows, you may have to say no to certain clients. Maybe certain clients are incredibly demanding and they never can act as a true partner, and they're always calling with hair and fire issues. There's been many times I've had to let clients like that grow, and it was sad, I have to say. I still miss them to this day. The problem is they weren't able to change with us. As we got better, they weren't able to reciprocate and improve their processes either. And so I made this approach where we would fade in a new change as we incrementally faded out older processes or weaker areas of the business, or maybe customer categories that just didn't work as well. And that helped a lot and allowed us to to have to make these more dramatic things like taking out a loan to get by, or cutting down the business before we grow again. This kind of 2 steps forward, 2 steps back approach. I've had plenty of those. I don't want to say that I haven't. It's just that I made sure that we had a strong balance sheet, and that's what allowed us to survive this long.
Sounds very thoughtful, and I'm sure your staff appreciates not having a layoff because that affects the whole morale and different things like the security. And I'm sure you have many staff who've been loyal to you over all those years because of the way that you approach, your business growth, which is fantastic. Let's talk about sort of where you are now, and if you can, and establish. I just want to establish sort of current picture, and then I want to go all the way back to the beginning when it was just you. Yep. Right now, how are you doing as far as the size of your agency, revenue? Just give us general numbers and the number of employees.
Yep. So we're about 70 employees, maybe a little bit less than that right now, and about 8.5 million in revenue annually. Most of it's recurring. We have long-term client relationships that span many, many years. And one of the other dimensions is we look across our client portfolio and we try to identify, well, are they growing as a result of our work? And so we're continuously asking ourselves, not just how much revenue we're driving and what our margin is, but are our clients actually benefiting from the relationship? And we try to identify the ones that may be struggling, and we put more energy and we invest to get those over the hump of growth and have those growth breakthroughs occur. And I have to say, there's no guarantees in marketing. There's no guarantees in sales transformation. And so it's a battle. And you're both trying to implement your unique approach with a client and keep a healthy business at the same time, and ensure that your growth is having impact on your clients. And it's challenging.
It's all about managing the tension
at
any point in time. All right. And then you yourself, you are involved in every aspect of the business, jack of all trades, the utility person, you got to lead the ship that way. But then now, so I know your head office is in New Jersey.
New York.
New York. And then you live in Montana. So how involved are you in the daily operation? It sounds like you're not involved, but walk me through, like, what's your average day and how divested are you from having to be on the front lines and work with clients?
Yeah. So when I started, you're absolutely spot on. And you've probably been through this many times yourself. I was managing projects. I was doing the work. I was writing code. I was doing the design. I was writing content. I was doing all of the different components of the business. And then when I had free time, I'd try to balance the books and manage QuickBooks, and deal with accounts receivable and payable. And it was stressful. It was challenging, but I knew what I was doing, in the sense that I knew I was there to learn. And I had a desire to incrementally replace those functions, hiring a bookkeeper, for example. At first it was part-time. I could only afford part-time. But it was nice to have a conversation with a person. I would hire developers, and usually they were on part-time or freelance in the very beginning too. But over time, I learned how to work with team members and get myself out of aspects of a project. There was a middle period of the business that was very difficult, because whenever you hire someone and you've been doing it for years, it's always hard to let go, especially when you're good at something. And someone new comes in and they may not be as good as you in the beginning, but that's okay. And I think a lot of business owners struggle with that transition because they want the work to be done at a certain level, and they need to, But there's a point when you start to build a business, I think you need to really think about what expectations are we setting with our clients? What is our value proposition that we can deliver against without me, the owner, doing the work? What is feasible? What's realistic? And I think that's a hard point for a lot of entrepreneurs, to give up the value that they can personally drive, because they take joy in it probably, versus what you can do with a group of people who are not you. And it took me many, many years to figure this out. And I really mean it. I made every mistake you can make, but I'm thankful that I did. I learned so much through that process. And I'm really thankful for all the pain that I went through, because it allowed me to get to a place where I realized there is a better way of working. And so today, I've been able to put together an incredible leadership team. I have a really powerful person in the business who my vice president, Aaron, who is just a powerhouse. I have this incredible team. I have directors who've been with me coming on 10 years. They have really learned to embody the methodology that we've created through this long journey as like an organization, and they've been able to work in alignment. And so the directors who have been around a lot longer are now helping the newer people who come into the company from both a cultural standpoint to a training and technical skill standpoint. And I feel like we're gaining more momentum there. For the first time, I'm starting to shift my role and get out of the day-to-day. I might step in here and there. If a team member's having a problem that I can uniquely solve, I'll step in. But then I always ask myself, well, how do I fix this next time? How do I get someone else to take over this function? My vice president is really overseeing the day-to-day of the business. And I focus more on some of our like our overarching methodology, our core service offerings methodology. I'm helping to stand up new lines of business, spending a lot of time thinking about and putting in place the pieces that allow us to become this vision that we're operating against, and refining that vision. And I love the place I'm in. I can definitely say that the business is self-sustaining. I'm actually really relieved to be out of the day-to-day, and I'm also trying to enforce some rules in the company that work-life balance is really important to Ironpaper. I want every single team member in the company to be able to have time for their family. And I want the same for myself. Like, work is fun. Can be great and really interesting, and you can learn a lot, but it cannot be everything. Now, it was for me in the first number of years of the business. There's nothing an entrepreneur is doing wrong if it's all encompassing in the beginning, but there has to be a migration away from that point. And I think part of it comes with writing things down, like, what is your value proposition? What do you actually do personally? And also, what can your team do without you to drive value? And how does that fulfill the value proposition? And I have to say, as the company grew, I had to constantly reestablish process and operational rules every 10 employees. So it doesn't stop. It's not like you put a blueprint in place and it just works. It's a process of continuous improvement, I have to say.
Okay, go back to, which is where many of our founders are. Maybe they've been working somewhere, maybe they've been working in an agency. They decide to hang out their own shingle and go solo. And, they got some clients, and great in terms of delivery, they're gig workers. And here's where we get into the whole myth. It's different than, someone who's the technician versus running the business. And like, it's not just doing the product or service, it's all the other stuff that has to do with business. Like you talked about, looking at the balance sheets and constantly establishing process and strategy and what have you. So we have the one founder got out. Let's say they've gotten to the point where they are successful, but they're in that weird zone where I have enough to kind of bring somebody on, but then there's going to be a lot of pressure that I either have to sell, or should I bring on a salesperson and then I'm the one delivering, but I want to divest myself. So think about, way back then, and you'd mentioned a few nuggets about bringing on freelancers, but what advice would you give to that founder in that situation? And let's just start scaling up, from there, and take it in stages. What advice would you give?
Yeah, I mean, this could be like a long conversation, and it's such a fun one. But I'm going to be very pragmatic. Let's say you're a founder of a company, it's just you. And I feel like it's important to learn how to work with others. And sometimes it's a big jump to hire a full-time employee. You have to do payroll, you have to do, there's a whole mechanism that gets put in place. So, I mean, for me, I learned how to work with freelancers, and then I would start to build retainers for freelancers, or at least frame out in my financial plan that I'd be dedicating a certain amount of money to other people being involved in the company. But one thing that I did is I didn't rush to bringing in another seller. I tried it many times and I've had a lot of problems. For one, the act for me to sell, it allows me a chance, it gives me a chance to talk to customers. And a founder has to develop that skill, and not all founders have it. And the act of selling is your chance to learn from prospective customers, and that's the act of improving your business. So I felt like I had to be involved in that for a period of time, and I still am. I just don't have to sell anymore. I just want to, because I like having my finger on the pulse. But in the beginning, for me, it was I hired engineers, I hired coders, I would hire designers, and then eventually I built up enough of a roster of really competent freelancers that I felt like I was learning how to work with others and not just being a micromanager, which to me means no management. And then I was able to then bring on someone part-time for bookkeeping, bring on someone for leading accounts, leading client accounts, and taking a lot of the day-to-day communications and scheduling off of my plate. That was a big move. And I started to build more functionality into that client-facing point of contact role, which for some businesses might be a project manager, other businesses it might be a marketing manager. And then I eventually started to just get to a place where I could increase the number of freelancers, where I could start to take, if I had maybe 2 or 3 freelancers, combine their jobs into a full-time role. And that was a very helpful transition piece where I could grow without taking huge leaps, but I could always look at having a small margin in place for a rainy day. And that was crucial. The other thing I wanted to just mention is, even at that early stage, I had to develop a philosophy that I communicated with these vendors that I'd hire, these freelancers. And so I wanted to make sure that we were all working in the same direction. Mind you, this was a hard-won lesson. And there were periods of time where we were technology agnostic. We worked with any technology. We would do design from many different perspectives. But I found it was more important that we had to get good at fewer things than be bad at everything.
Yeah, it's kind of like putting on some guardrails. Narrowing the lane down helps you maintain the quality, especially if you're bringing on somebody else to do the work for you. Quality control, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, so let me summarize what I heard. And I think the other founders, I'm going to be sending this all over the place, that are in the service business can listen to it. First, you manage your unit economics. So what you did is you carved off pieces. You proactively looked at and said, I'm going to dedicate this amount of work to, bringing somebody on. You segmented it. It was very modular the way that you did it. And so you're kind of piecemealing it out across these different vendors, getting used to working with them. And then when all the unit economics made sense, you combine them, and then I can bring on a employee. But before that, similar to like a salary for an employee, you create a retainer structure. So you dedicate a certain amount so you could keep these freelancers engaged on a month-to-month basis. So they were around like employees, but without the administrative overhead and the whole process of having employees. How'd I do describing that?
You did really well, but I didn't mention I was also doing at that time, a lot of project-based work.
Okay.
For a very long time. And so there was a little bit of a boom and bust approach.
Sure.
And through that process, when I didn't have enough work to keep some of these freelancers, I did lose them. Okay. And they were jobs full time. And I started to realize that I eventually wanted to work with people that I got to know really well, and where we could work together with common understandings of how we'd approach different types of projects, and the knowledge would accrue over time, as opposed to the piecemeal nature of working with freelancers. And it kind of gave me a sense of what I wanted to work towards with my company.
Now tell me, how did you manage your rates at that time? Did you increase your rates to pay for these freelancers? Did you say, no, you know what? I have this amount of margin for myself. So now I got to go get two jobs. Because again, that's that weird purgatory. You're between two worlds. And a lot of times the founders say, service provider, if they're the ones doing the primary delivery, they say, well, if I bring somebody on and they need this amount, I can't live off anything. So I might as well just be the one doing the delivery. So how did you figure out that whole managing the rates to pay for these people you're bringing on?
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, I factored into the very first job we got, which required coding some types of languages that I didn't know as well. And so I needed someone to collaborate with me on it. And I would do some of the coding and they would too. And my very first project involved a freelancer. And a lot of times in the beginning, I'd have the freelancers quote. I would break down the project into kind of functions that we needed to accomplish or mini milestones. And so to have them quote the milestone and then, or a couple milestones, and then I would factor in the total workload and then quote the project. But I tried to keep it, I made a lot of mistakes. I would quote too large of a project and I would make a loss or I'd just get by. But it taught me a lot. And I have to say that I started working with freelancers from the very first day. And I would do projects by myself on the side where I didn't require freelancers, but it was a critical part of not getting caught into this trap where entrepreneurs feel like they have to be the ones to do the work all the time. And they're basically just, they build themselves a complicated job.
That's brilliant. It seems so simple. I had never even thought about that. Just plan on hiring people from day one. You don't have to, you just bake it in, right away and you plan for it. Then the next question is, how did you maintain quality? And let me make this a compound question. You're out there, you got to make sure that you maintain quality. We talked about, sort of narrowing the lane so that, because I believe narrow the parameters in those functions so you can make people successful. You can set them up for success. So give them enough that they can get the success. And that's really defining what they do, scopes, what have you. But then, like, what did you do when founders, let me describe this situation. Like, say you're in there and you're talking to a client and you've got your idea what you need to charge for you and the vendors, but they don't have the budget. And so now the founder is in that position as a service provider. I'm going to take a bath on this, and this doesn't have enough budget to pay, but I'm going to do it anyway because I don't want to lose the work, and it needs to be a certain quality, and I don't know how to do, good enough, or like navigating that weird zone where sometimes the price isn't there or the budget isn't there. How did you work that through?
Well, I have to go back to that thing. I did make almost every mistake you can make, right? So, I mean, I've had projects where I charged, let's say, this much, and I did this much work. I mean, I did 100% more than was budgeted. I've done everything. I've had projects where I couldn't afford freelancers because we used up the entire project budget. So I had to just keep putting in work myself and writing code and doing design and thinking through things and finding ways to drive value. I think I had to learn how to set expectations with clients better. And one of the ways that I did it would be, after projects didn't go well, I'd just sit there over a weekend and write down what didn't go well. I'd have to do this kind of like, I would just write and write and write, almost like a summary of the project, and think about all the different mistakes I made and we made as a company and write them all down, and then ask myself, how could I handle that differently or better? Where should I have charged more? What could I have shaved off? And then incrementally, I would start to do those, take action upon some of those insights. Like, I would start to, if I was doing a website project, for example, I would start to create more confines on, this is how we're going to handle this stage of the project. These are the things we won't do. And I'd start to define both what we won't do and what we will do, setting kind of boundaries for a project, which Again, it felt like there was no bounds to the need for scope constraint, but eventually I found ways of quoting projects better, defining scope better, creating conditional logic within proposals to say, if this happens, then this is the consequence, or this is the action we take. It took a lot of years. It took a lot of trial and error. And I think we got to a place now where we can set much more clear expectations. And it's helpful. Clients are a lot happier with constraints because they know what they're getting into then. They know what they can expect. And I think a lot of times with early stage businesses, you want the sale so badly, you're willing to compromise your own, yourself in your own aims and your own desire for quality just to make the sale complete. And that is a losing scenario.
You can over promise, so much temptation to
Absolutely.
over promise, and then there's no way you can deliver, so you'll always be under delivering. Here's the last question for founders at this stage. A lot of times you'll go there and clients want to talk to the owner of the business or the principal consultant or whoever is the main expert. And a lot of the leverage in terms of multiplication and being able to spread yourself out and do more, work smarter, not harder, is to have communication go to somebody else or have someone as the account manager, etc. But that person is representing you. And sometimes the client would rather come talk to you. How did you get over that hump where you're not the primary contact and you're the one spending all the time managing that relationship?
Yeah, I think I started to recognize it was a problem when I got to about 30 employees, 20 to 30. It was a problem before then. I would get exhausted. Like leaving a week, I would be just burnt out, not wanting to show up. I mean, just not even wanting to come in on Monday. And I'd be working through the weekends, of course. A couple things. I really started to meditate on what is Ironpaper's talent bench? How strong are our people and how skilled are they? And are they getting training and are they developing new capabilities with communication, articulation, both their technical skills, hard skills? And that was one of the focal points and definitely one of the parts of the solution. I also recognize that our work is hard. This is not factory-like work. There's no guarantees of success. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of critical thinking. So because of that kind of makeup or recipe composite, I had to build a leadership team. I needed leaders because clients do need a sounding board. They need a partner. They need someone with experience and who's been through it before. And I know a lot of agencies took the path of, well, we can get a better margin if we have an all junior staff and just bring in more warm bodies that have, right out of college. It just didn't work for us. And so I started to meditate on what kind of talent bench do we need to grow into and develop over time. And then how do we also build a leadership group that can help our clients understand and make sense of their strategy and the path ahead. And then on top of that, how do we continuously train both our leaders and our team on an array of skills that makes our clients successful over time? That was the start of the recipe for fixing this. I also decided to build a more top-heavy model, which put pressure on our margin. We have a large leadership team. We have about 16 directors, and so or more, and it helps. And so now clients feel like they don't just have like their point of contact director. They also have directors that might specialize in content or web and other facets of the business. And so we're bringing like a powerhouse team to the table. And I have to say, this didn't happen overnight. And I just want to say to the founders that may be struggling and feeling like they're, really disappointed in their own performance because they don't have, let's say, this kind of leadership team, or they're not where they want to be. It's okay. Honestly, throughout all these years, I would just take this time and write down, what am I doing wrong? What could I have done better? And I would keep asking myself those questions. And I'd always be looking for small things that I could implement right now that could start chipping away at the bigger problems instead of just trying to solve the bigger problem all at once, because I could never do that. And so things like incrementally investing in, better, stronger employees who could come in, or newer processes, or bringing leaders in, or setting up better leadership training or articulation or skill training. All of those different techniques have helped get me to the place I am today. And I'm really happy with where I am today. I have to say, after 20 years of really developing Ironpaper and focusing on building this one company, I'm happier than I've ever been. My work-life balance is better than it ever has been. And I love my team. I love them. I'm so thrilled to come to work and be able to work with this incredible team that I have. But it took work to get here.
I'm sure the feeling is mutual. Let's summarize. What I heard is leadership. You actually said some contrarian things that I'm not used to hearing. First is leadership, training, investing in them, and then you decide to go top heavy.
Yeah.
Breaking it apart is we're always taught to bring in managers, and where managers have strong technical capability, leaders have adaptive capabilities. They're able to talk to clients, build relationships, all that stuff. So you said it. Clients want someone that they can connect with and brainstorm with. And just having a technically sound manager, that may not necessarily be the case. So you brought in leadership. Then also, I'm definitely used to the model where you bring in juniors and associates and everything like that in the consulting model, because my rate is high, and then what you do is you get your margin from bringing in people that you can pay less to, but you decide to go top heavy. Now I'm going to predict that by going top heavy and bringing in more leaders brings in better quality of work, makes it easier to sell, and even though there might be less margin, there's more in terms of volume of work, because you have that best-in-class leadership team to connect with the clients, and then you're separated. They don't have to rely on you so much. You can work on strategy of the business. So it really is that investment that continues to perpetually pay itself off as you made that decision, which is very contrarian to how others are taught to build that agency. How'd I do?
You're spot on. And then I'm just going to add, the leaders then help build the middle layer, the management layer. And they can then start nurturing the team to grow into that layer, or helping hire from the outside. And I think both are important. I know a lot of people talk about, well, do you build a company by hiring from the outside or from growing from within? And I have to say, I don't think it's so black and white. I think you have to do both to grow a company. You have to recognize where are our gaps, and you also have to recognize what is this talent base, what's their potential, and do both simultaneously, and keep the conversation going so that people can see themselves in the future state of the company.
It's just like sports. You have your farm team and you're bringing people through the minors, but sometimes you splurge and you go out and get a free agent, right? Someone who's got experience from the outside, maybe a different perspective. Okay. And you're right. We could be talking all day about this. I could pepper you with all these questions. I'm sure we could create like a master's, like a higher education, graduate degree course on how to build an agency this way. But let me just ask one more question, and then we kind of wrap up. So let's say the founders there has got this building freelancers, starting to bring on employees. Let's talk about marketing, client acquisition.
Yeah.
If you had to say, in all your years, what are some of the best practices? Like, what has been the client acquisition strategy that's been the best bang for your dollar? What would you recommend? Walk us through.
Yeah. I found personally that a lot of agencies will strive to find a demand referral channel, and I've used them time and time here and there. For me, though, I felt we are a digital and marketing agency. I need to learn how to build my own demand. And I find a lot of marketing agencies cannot develop demand, yet they get paid to do it for another company. So are you really being true to yourself if you don't develop your own demand channel and put your skills to practice for yourself? And I know the excuse, we don't have time, we're serving client needs, but then where do you want to take your business? Do you really want to develop your business if you have to develop a demand channel, whether it's SEO or whether it's learning how to use pay-per-click or LinkedIn ads? get really good at building a demand channel. It could be referrals. It could be, there's a vast collection. You could do events. It doesn't even have to be the kind of marketing that you do. But I found that by building a demand channel and growing it over the years, it gave me a place where I could experiment. And it's frankly one of the places where I did a lot of my innovation. And it changed the services I've offered to clients based on what I was learning through my own demand channel. I think it's crucial. And sure, in the very beginning stages, I mean, you may have to pay for referrals or whatever, but try to break from that. Try to build your own.
Define demand channel.
Yeah, so an example could be something as simple as an ad campaign, right? Getting really good at paid campaigns that generate leads for your business and controlling every aspect in the process, from your website, your landing pages, the channel that drives the traffic, so that you can get a lead and you can take that lead through a sales process. That's an example. Another one could be organic. Maybe it's social media, organic social media, paid social media. It honestly doesn't matter which one. I've throughout all these years, I've used every demand channel you can. I have my favorites. It's personal. There's no objective one that's better than another. It's what you're good at.
It's funny as I'm having all these sort of moments where the light bulbs are going off, because you have this way, Jonathan, of saying something and making something that I've been unconsciously competent about, and you have a way of saying it, making me realize, hey, wait a second, yeah, it's actually what happens. So, for example, in my world, I've always been a big fan of build a brand so people talk about you and they want to contact you. So don't I've never enjoyed SEO. I've never enjoyed, paid ads. I've never enjoyed, those types of things. And so when I go and I'll teach a company, I will teach them the very thing that I have done that I've been successful at. So it's the same thing. I guess it's really holding these marketing agencies accountable, or people working in marketing. If you're going to say you're great at SEO, well, you better be practicing what you preach, if you will. And so if you take that approach and you try all these things and you experiment, then it doesn't matter. There is no best practice. It's whatever is best suited for you. That's what I heard. Find out and then keep iterating and innovating upon all the different options that you've got and try them out. Not one size fits all. You'll find what works for you.
Yes, and I think ultimately part of what works has to be about how much effort does it take to generate a lead that could become an opportunity and then a client. And one organization might be incredible at cold calling. I don't like that approach. But the question is, how many calls do you have to make before you generate a lead? How many bridges are you burning to get to where you want to go? I mean, I see other agencies that might be trying to advertise on top of someone else's brand through Google Ads. Remember, you're burning bridges. Is that really how you want to get to where you want to go? And you make a lot of enemies along the way. And I never believed in those approaches. And I think part of it is you have to ask yourself, what is our ethical stance in the market too? And, is the means that we're trying to get to where we want to go the right approach? And is it going to build the right long-term brand? Because you never know. Maybe your company will survive. And maybe that company is going to be something that you want to really hold on to and cherish and invest in. And if you burn bridges all along the way, you have a lot of work to do when you get to this point where you're like, I love this company. I want to keep building it.
So true. Last question. Here's a scenario. We have kidnapped your family. Just setting it up.
Oh,
we're holding them hostage. And we're saying, we're not going to let your family go until you give us the one piece of enduring advice that's just going to continually just haunt us with value, that your words are going to echo in the ears of all our founders that are building, service-based companies. What's one piece of advice that you think will last through the entire journey to, right from inception to get to where you are? What would be that piece of advice that you would give to the founders who are going to be listening to this?
It's a package answer. Get feedback and be authentic. Those two things go together.
Let's be a little more explicit. How to get feedback and how do you become authentic?
Yeah. I mean, so I'll give an example. It's inevitable that if you're starting a new business, you're going to lose a deal. Ask for feedback. it's inevitable that if you're trying to hire someone, you're one day going to lose an employee if you're going to build a team. Ask why. Ask your team, what do you think about working here? But don't try to put answers in their mouth. Just listen to what they're saying. Take down notes. And that's the authentic part. Really try to absorb what people are sharing with you. And I think a lot of times founders have this very kind of focused vision of what they are and their impact on the world. I think it's really important to get out of that mindset and ask, maybe I'm not so perfect. Maybe there is room for me to improve, or my company to improve, or our service offering, or how we impact our team. And one of the things I've learned over the years, and there's been periods where I have not done this, and maybe I think this is something that really took away, is your customers and your employees have a lot of ways to help you grow. You just got to ask for feedback.
I so appreciate just your calming demeanor. It's wonderful just listening to you. It's like soaking up everything that you're saying. And I just want to say thank you and acknowledge you for everything that you've done. And even in the short time that we've been getting know each other, how much value you provide and just how generous you've been. Let's talk about how other founders listening to this and in startups.com can contact you. What's your invitation to them? How can they proceed? What next steps with you?
Yeah, I think it might be helpful if someone's dealing with a problem and they're just really frustrated and struggling, and they do want to chat with me. I'd definitely be open. I don't have a lot of slots to be open to talk to everybody, but if I feel like I can be helpful, if they could share a message and kind of just articulate what their challenge is. I probably will need to ask some questions and better understand what they're going through, where their business is, what stage of the business they're in. Like I mentioned, every 10 employees for me was a complete new shift and change in the approach to the market and the business. That's helpful. And I just want to say that I tend to respond better to people who, when are authentic themselves and do listen to feedback and are open, because listen, this is a struggle. Running a business is not easy. I've experienced so many challenges. I've had a year of insomnia before. I definitely get it. And I think there are better ways of working. Sometimes they're hard won, and sometimes there are blueprints out there to solve some of the common problems that owners and entrepreneurs experience. And if I can help a company, love to.
Let me be your agent, and I'll just put out the message there. Contact me. Jonathan and I, we're doing groups. We got a regular thing going on. Join startups.com, or if you're already a member, contact me. I'll get you in the group. And I think that's going to be just a wonderful community that we're starting to build around our service providers. And then if you have something a little more acute or what have you, I'll be more than happy for anybody watching this to make the introduction if it's going to make sense, or if I can't get you another resource somewhere. But we're going to try and just really cherish anything that you can provide. But let's build community together. And I would say invite people into the community that you're going to participate in together. And I think that's a really great way to make those connections. What do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And the startups community is profound. There are a lot of great people. And I've been blown away by how open people have been and how helpful and supportive of each other they are. And it's a really beautiful thing. And I think it's special. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much. Well, this has been fantastic. We're going to have many more of these conversations, I know for a fact. So thank you for your time today, Jonathan. Thank you.
I'm thrilled. Thank you. Thanks, Ed.